I slept fine last night. Didn't sleep too well the night before, though. It was my own fault, really. I did tell him he was welcome in if he pleased. My dream began like one of those horror games you might see, like Silent Hill or Alone in the Dark. It was night out and almost pitch black. I was holed up in some building, hiding from something, or waiting. I couldn't really tell. I peeked out. The door was glass and had some rule stickers on it. I suppose I was in a corner store. Upon looking out, I see a deserted street, lit by a few dim street lamps. The street was dead empty, dead silent. I seemed to be in the middle of a city, yet there was nothing. I tentatively opened the door, creeping out into the cold night. Ever have one of those dreams where you can feel what's happening? This was one of those dreams. I turned left out the door and began walking. The street was sloped and I was going down. Suddenly, I stopped in front of a building. Looking to my left at it, it seemed like a small house. Not one like you'd see in the city. It was shambles, a light gray-blue color. I felt the need to go in, to see the inside. I crept up to the door and turned the handle. Opening the door, I looked in. There wasn't much but a few boxes, a table, and a bed. I moved silently towards the bed. On it slept a person. I glared down at her for a few moments. Her sleeping figure taunted me. I bent down, picked up an object, and swung. The brick ensured that she would not wake up soon. Dropping the bloody, hair-matted brick, a message flashed through my mind, clear as day, a dark, deep, raspy voice speaking through my mind. The sinew will sew together the darkness and damnation. I only know of one kind of sinew. It's the stuff inside of you, connected to your muscles and bones, that let you move the way you do. Looking over to the table, I saw in the moonlight a glint off of something. I walked over and there sat a knife, placed perfectly in the center, the blade facing away from me. He knew I was coming. He knew he could tell me to do this. He knew I would oblige. I picked up the knife and walked back over to the unconscious form in the bed before me. Her blonde hair was spilled out around her. Her head was bleeding profusely. I feel now as though I recognize her, but I can't be sure. I tore the sheet off of her and brought the knife down to her, stripping her flesh from bone until the muscles were all visible. I began grabbing at the sinew, slicing at it, and piled it all up. Once I gathered all I could, I began wrapping it around itself. It formed a blindfold. I put it on and all was black until the darkness was filled with an image. A house far off, silhouetted against the night sky. Atop it was a figure and a dog. The dog howled and the figure turned towards me. His tattered cowl flapped in a soundless wind. His blazing eyes bore into me, the blood-red beads that were his pupils boring into my soul. He grinned at me, knowing he'd just gotten one step closer to corruption. I began calling him. Like in many dreams, there was things I could not control. My voice was strained, and even though I shouted as loud as I could, the sound traveled mere feet. I woke up soon after that, feeling as though I had not slept at all. And I knew I hadn't. That wasn't sleep. He'd brought me into his world he'd done so many times before, and he'd watch what I did as I was placed in a deserted carnival, in a school of ravenous creatures waiting to devour me and my closest friend. He's there sometimes, my friend, but I think I know why. I think he's sick too. I looked around and knew where I'd been. I knew what I'd seen. The sinew will sew together in darkness and damnation. And it had. He'd shown himself to me. He was no longer what he'd been, a shapeless shadow. A shadow with no eyes. One with a call and a demon grin. One whose eyes glowed hot with flames. One who spoke to me and caressed my face with clawed shadow hands. No, he had a shape now. He's real. He's come so far, there's no way to get rid of him now. He needs a vessel, and he's chosen me. Besides, everyone is a little sick, even if they don't want to believe it. I was awoken by a loud thumping sound. Startled, I sat up in bed, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness of my room. No odd shapes. Thinking it was my imagination, I went back to sleep. But for a few minutes later, the low thumping happened again. I opened my eyes and glanced at the clock next to my nightstand. It read 12 a.m. Midnight. Wasn't that the witching hour? I snorted at the silly saying. I don't believe in such nonsense. I believe that the thumping was probably an animal on the roof. All sorts of night animals tend to get up there, especially at this hour. The sound had to be coming from above, and it just sounds like it's in my room. I was about to close my eyes again, but suddenly the thumping happened again, louder. Okay, so now I'm a little creeped out. I never heard something so loud before. I shut my eyes tight and tried to fall back asleep. I wish my parents were home. They left earlier today to visit my sick grandmother, and my older brother is spending the night with his girlfriend. I almost wished Ashley was here. She's this annoying airhead from school. Can't stand her snobby attitude, and it sucked that she lived next door. At the moment, though, I started wishing even she was here with me. Thump. Oh God. I pulled the covers over my head and tried to ignore the sound. It has to be my imagination. Yep, just imagining it. I shouldn't have read so many creepypasta stories before falling asleep. Creepy stories from the site always give me nightmares. An hour passed. No more thumping. Good. Started to feel sleepy again. As I start to doze off, I hear the whisper. I have come for you. My eyes shot open. I will feast on your soft flesh. I started to cry. That voice was real. There was something in the room with me. I will enjoy the sounds of your screams while I slowly peel off your skin. I didn't want to look, but I felt like I had to. My eyes tried to locate the smooth, deep voice, the voice that was threatening horrid things. I quickly spotted it. He was at the foot of my bed. Even in the darkness, I could see how tall he was, and very pale. His large black eyes glared down at me with such intense hatred. Why was he angry at me? I don't understand, but did I even want to? Tonight, Ashley, you will die, he whispered angrily. I was about to scream, but then I realized something. Did he just say Ashley? I'm not Ashley, I managed to shout at the pale man. You're not? Asked the pale man with a puzzled expression. No, my name's Erica. Ashley lives in the house next door, I explained nervously. The pale man stared at me for a moment, and then he pulled out a piece of paper from a pocket and studied it. With a look of annoyance, he stuffed the paper back in his pocket and smiled at me. Oh God, his smile. His mouth was too wide, and his teeth were sharp, maybe even razor sharp. My deepest apologies. I was given the wrong information. Sorry to have disturbed your rest, he said politely, and then I watched, stunned, as he crawled out my bedroom window. Oh, He popped his head back inside and grinned at me with that large, scary grin. I know this is rather strange, coming from me, but would you like to maybe catch a movie one of these days? Or dinner, perhaps? I'm kind of already seeing someone, I said. Oh, pity. Well, have a good night, he said as his head popped back out. I stood frozen for a bit. I couldn't believe what just happened. Nobody would believe me. Well, it was gone now, whatever the hell he was. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I was brave enough to finally move and went to close my window and lock it securely. As I settled into sleep, I realized something. It was going to get Airhead Ashley. I was about to dart out of bed but stopped. She was pretty nasty to everybody. Not like she was somebody I cared for, too. Oh well, I thought as I snuggled back into my warm blanket and went back to sleep. Do you have a Facebook account? You know, those people on Facebook that you don't even know that try to add you. Well, I'm one of those people. It all started about a year ago. A lot of things have happened since then. I never really had any intention of joining Facebook in the first place. I didn't want to humiliate myself by letting the whole world know how unpopular I was. I was a first-class loner. I barely had any friends. I hated how no one ever talked to me. People treated me like I didn't even exist. I kept hearing people talking about Facebook, and I decided to create an account. It was kind of scary at first, letting the entire world know what I was doing. I was giving up my privacy and freedom, but I thought it might help me finally fit in. At first, Facebook seemed very foreign to me. I had 0 messages, 0 notifications, and 0 friend invites. It was just like in real life. Only this time, the whole world could see it. Regardless, I started exploring the site. I can still recall the first thing I did when I started using Facebook. Remember the game with the fish? You know that game, right? It was my favorite. I used to spend hours on it. I would buy countless fish, but I never feed them. I just wanted to watch them die. Watching fish die was so much fun. I probably would have played it forever if I hadn't received that first friend request. I couldn't believe it. Somebody wanted to be my friend. I eagerly clicked accept. It was the best feeling that I could ever describe. After I clicked on the person's profile, I saw what Facebook was really all about. He had hundreds of friends and countless status updates, all of them with at least 5 likes each, so I wanted that as well. I began to snoop through his friends list and I added every single person that he was friends with. It took about 5 hours, but it was worth it. I didn't really know any of them, and some of them just ignored me, but others accepted my request without thinking twice. As soon as I became friends with them on Facebook, I was able to learn everything about them. I passed the first 2 weeks adding people. Then, I added everyone they knew. Before long, my popularity began growing exponentially. People finally knew who I was. It was all so wonderful. Some of the kids at my school even started talking to me. It was insane. I began to fall in love with social networking. I became a Facebook addict. I hated not being online. The thought of not knowing what everyone was doing or what they were thinking was overwhelming. I hated the time I had to spend in school. Every hour away from Facebook seemed like spending an eternity in hell. I spent every free moment I had on the site. I began dreaming about using it, and soon enough, I stopped dreaming altogether. I developed insomnia, which was great for me because it meant I could spend even more time on Facebook, especially since the school year had just ended. It was sweet to be able to spend every single waking moment of my life on Facebook. But spending so much time on it allowed me to also see the dark side of Facebook. There were a lot of people on there that still refused to accept my friend request. I had sent thousands upon thousands, and yet, still I only had around 2,000 friends. It was obvious that those people had something against me. Why else would they not want to be friends with me? Yes, why else? There had to be a solution to all this madness, and it was obvious. Yes, it was also clear then. All I had to do was get rid of them. I still remember my first victim. Truly, I had nothing against her. She was so young, so beautiful, and so innocent. I will never forget those eyes, those piercing black eyes. The thing I remember most about her was how much she bled and how loud she screamed. I relive that feeling every time I choose a new victim. Come to think of it, I just sent you a friend request. If I were you, I'd think twice about clicking deny. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. But I've been just plain creepy, and I'll catch you in the next video.